Hi, shalom friends. We all think about this. What makes a food tasty? What is the secret of good tasting food? And very often the chef will tell you it's the spices. And anyone that just does a little bit of cooking at home knows you could cook with love, you could put the best intention into food, but not necessarily will the person taste the love or the good intention. But if you put spices, you could turn something very ordinary, something even bland, into something which is absolutely marvelous. Spices not only change the taste, but they actually add color and fragrance. And the more you think about the importance of spices, it's almost as if it's the spirituality of the food itself. There's the actual food, whether it be a piece of meat or whether it be pasta, and that has nutrients and calories, but it has limited taste. I'm not even talking about salt, which technically is a mineral, not a spice, but in order to bring out and to enhance the flavor, almost to make it taste something completely different, that is the spicing of it, and then the presentation of it. Well, we all take spices for granted. Not everyone knows how to use it properly, and we certainly admire those that seem to have that down pat. Now, this is an introduction to a very special spice that God gives us. The story happened a little bit less than 1,800 years ago. It happened in the Holy Land of Israel, and the way the Midrash relates it is more or less in the following manner. The leader of the Jewish people was Reb Judah the Prince, a very pious, wealthy, learned leader of the Jewish people. And he was on a very intimate and close name basis, or actually true friendship, with one of the leaders of the Roman countries, and whose name was Antoninus. And they were so close that occasionally Antoninus would actually drop in to the rabbi's house for a meal. So as the story goes, one Shabbat, Antoninus comes, and Rebbe, who was the leader of the Jewish people, had a magnificent royal table, and the king was invited, and a very lavish spread was offered to him. Now, as we all know, that on the Shabbat, you're not allowed to cook. So all of the foods that were served were actually cold. Yet the king seemed to eat with great relish, enjoyed it very, very much, and thanked his good friend. Sometime later, when this Antoninus, this high Roman dignitary, I called him a king, I'm not sure if he was a king or perhaps he was the governor, but he had a tremendous influence and power over Israel as a leader. He drops by the leader of the Jewish people, and this time it's in a weekday, so they quickly offer this leader, Antoninus, warm, delicious foods. As they're partaking of the food, Antoninus says to the rabbi, the food is very tasty, but actually, a couple of weeks ago, when you served me Saturday, cold food, for some reason, was far more tasty than this stuff. This is delectable, but that was exquisite. So Rabbeinu HaKadosh says to him, well, I guess it was missing a spice. That had a special spice that this food does not. To which Antoninus got a little indignant. Well, why didn't you put in the spice? And if you couldn't afford it, I certainly could afford it. So the rabbi with a smile responded, it's not a spice that you could buy. You see, the Sabbath or the Shabbat is a gift that God gave the Jewish people, and that day of Shabbat spices the food. So any food which is prepared and served on the Shabbat, or prepared and served in honor of the Shabbat, has that taste of the Shabbat. But if I use exactly the same ingredients, and I serve you that food, and I cook it on Tuesday, and serve it to you in the most beautiful of china, it's missing the spice of Shabbat, and therefore it does not taste like Shabbat food, and hence the difference. And that's how the Midrash concludes this part of the story. Now, the lesson is very true, and those of us that are privileged to enjoy Shabbat dinners and Shabbat lunches and Shabbat kiddushim could probably testify that the food on Shabbat tastes awesome, much better than the week, even though we sometimes use the same recipe. But I believe that we could read into the story another insight. And when Rebbe said to Antoninus, there's a day called Shabbat, and that's the spice that God gives the Jewish people, I don't think he was limiting it to the foods of Shabbat. I think perhaps he was hinting to that the Shabbat is the spice of the week. Now let's go back to spices. It's interesting, you could sometimes put spice on one part of the food, but actually the taste gets diffused throughout the entire dish. I believe that what makes the 6 days of the week enjoyable and worthwhile is the fact that the Shabbat blesses it and gives it a spice. What does Shabbat mean to you? Well, when I ask the question to you, obviously every person will have another response. But let me share with you some ideas. Shabbat actually is a time where a person is able to go a bit away from trying to change the world into the mode of appreciating the world. You see, during the 6 days, it is a mitzvah to support your family, yourself. And in general terms, it's a mitzvah to work, to enhance, to be productive, to change, to transform, to challenge. God gives us a beautiful world, and he says, do the best. You're scientists, you're builders, make something of the beautiful ingredients that I'm giving you. Make it even nicer, enhance it. But not on Shabbat. On Shabbat, the doctor, the lawyer, the plumber, the electrician, the porter, the driver, we all take a step back and say, look, God created such a beautiful world with beautiful people, with so much knowledge available, and so much love available, and so much community available, and so much holiness available, and so much closeness available. This is the 25 hours of the week that I'm going to absorb as much as possible. So if you're privileged to have a community, if you're privileged to have a spouse, if you're privileged to have children, or if you're privileged to have friends, or you're privileged to have all of them, the Shabbat, these 25 hours, gives you a vantage and a perspective that's completely enjoyable. You don't have to create anything. You have to learn how to use what God created. Now, if I were to say Shabbat is the spice, well, how would the spice taste or season the rest of the week? And I would suggest a mystical thought that's brought down, that prayer during the day is the Shabbat of the day. So in the middle of work, or perhaps in the morning before you go to work, you're not involved yet with the computers, you're not yet involved with the sale, you're not yet involved with the commute. And what you do is you take a step back and you say, Almighty God, the world that you created is here. You are the one that gives wisdom. You are the one that gives parnasa, that gives sustenance and nourishment. You're the one that sends healing. Everything that's here can be used for good. When you absorb these holy words, you're not changing the world. You're acknowledging the presence of God in the world. Now you could go out and actually do your thing. Accomplish what you would like to accomplish. Your goals could be mighty and great, but you need the spice of the Shabbat, that during the day, take a step back from yourself and concentrate on the bigger picture of God's presence, which it does exist, and then the glory that you have in trying to reveal some of that presence. So friends, any good chef will tell you, you have to know how to use the spices. Too much is not too good. Too little will not do the job. Shabbat is here. It is the spice. How much prayer, how much of the aura of Shabbos can you bring into your life? I don't know. I know that I'm still trying to spice up my life, and I wish you luck in yours. Shalom.